Good morning. Wherever you are, I say good morning, but I know some of you that come on are already into the afternoon, and so welcome. I think it's going to be a lovely day here. Oh, the daffodils in Livermore. There's a hillside in Livermore that is planted completely with daffodils, and oh my gosh, in the spring it's incredible. Good morning, Robin and Alice. Ohio, hopefully you're still not frozen there. It's starting to warm up for you guys back on the east. Good morning, Lynn and Sherry. Wisconsin, another cold place. Sometimes when I start to think about being cold, I think of you guys in that direction, and I decide I don't have anything to complain about with that. So, all right. Today we continue with our block of the month for the Kona solid, fabrics. And really am liking this. I tend not to use already pre-packaged fabrics most of the time. I do use them, but what I want to say about that this morning, just as a comment for you, is that when you use packaged fabrics, you're a little bit more constricted by how you go about making whatever block or whatever pattern that you are. And the blocks that we are making work really well for charm packs because we can put them into the half square triangles, etc. But a lot of our blocks, as you can probably see, and if you are creating your, using your own fabrics to create this quilt, you can use yardage and change that up to make some of this a little bit easier for you. I don't know if it's easier. Sometimes it's just that we can make blocks, or we have a sewing style that works better for, doing something one way or the other. And so I just want you to know, after last week, for those of you who show up each week, and I see your names there, and I absolutely love to see all of that. But I can do this without putting it on the wrong way and getting that center correct. So I had to show you that just so you know. Me talking and sewing or doing any two things at the same time is tough for me. And I don't really know why that is. In just a minute, I just dropped a block. But it is. And maybe some of you have that same issue. So I'll try not to talk and sew at the same time so I can concentrate. So what I want to say is that with some of these blocks that we are working with, it is, if you can do it in another way, if you're using your own fabrics and not constricted by, the prepackaged, fabrics such as charm packs, layer cakes, and the 2-inch strips, all of that. Go ahead and do that and work through it. And if any of you have changed the size of your blocks or something, let me know and send a picture. I'd love to see it in a different size for that. So today I'm going to drop you down and let me see how, tell me in the chat box how you're doing and what's happening there. All right. So today, and I've been working on my camera here. It looks kind of blurry to me. I don't know if it is for you as well, but it's kind of been annoying to me this morning. We're working on the May pattern first, and that's this block. And as you can see, the center of it looks like a square and a square. And you have your flying geese on the outside. And again, you can make flying geese so many different ways. There are so many rulers out there. There are different methods that you can work with. And usually right now on the internet, you can find charts that tell you exactly how to cut for whatever size that you want for that. I do like all of the half square triangles. It certainly has challenged me to work a little bit more carefully and slowly to get those points where they are. And if you have any tips or hints for us as you work through your blocks, please put them in the chat box, because we learn from each other, and it works out that way. I went ahead and created the top and the bottom layer for this, the top row and the bottom row of this particular block, and want to put it together with you. So I'm going to lay that aside for a moment. And for the center row, I have, the left side, I have the right side to go here. And when we're going to bring this center square to square block together, we're going to have, a number of points and to bring, to put together. So let's just do it. Okay. So, and it always takes me a minute to make sure I have this right. And I'll have a tendency to, when I put things over, to flip them, and I don't really necessarily want to do that. The other thing I want to tell you is about pressing. On these, I pressed to the dark side, and I left it that way so I could share this with you on camera today. Is that when I pressed all of these to the dark side, not thinking at that point in time about this center block, when I put these together, I am going to end up with the fabric going in the same direction on both sides. And I don't necessarily want it that way. I have a tendency to be lazy and not work with, and repress it and rework that on that side. So what you do need to do when it comes to that is I would suggest that you lay your entire block out, and you do not press until you have put your blocks together in the direction or the way that you want them to go, so that they butt up against each other. But at the same time, they may not always butt up together at the sides and the corners. And I found that to be true. So you're going to have to work with that a little bit in terms of, I'm a visual learner, and so I have to put it together, see it didn't work. Half the time I have to take something apart and redo it or repress it or something, so I see that, and then I write it onto my pattern. There are those of you who I know can look at the pattern and say, oh, it needs to be pressed this way or that way, and you have that spatial ability. And so do that. Pay attention to the way your blocks are put, because no matter which block is up or which block is down, if you pressed it so that they're going to match, they're going to hit here. And if you decide to go ahead and leave it this way, which I tend to do, and I'm going to do it right here on camera and make that a mistake. And so it needs to be sewn along here. That's where I will sometimes flip it, but I need to remember that I flipped it, because I don't necessarily want to start at this edge where all that bulk is. On the other hand, know your machine, know what your machine kind of does and how it works, because if your machine pushes or pulls or has trouble getting started on that, you really don't want to sew on the side. But if your machine will sit on there and sew through that and then move into the double layer, then it doesn't matter that much. I tend to want to flip it over and sew into this instead. And when I pin it, this is, there's so many different ways to you know, to do all this stuff, I will pin so that my pin goes right at the top and it comes through on the other side and holds those together so that that corner, and you have an exact corner if you trimmed your blocks up, okay? And that way I can size up this side, and then I'm going to flip it, but I need to remember that I have to flip it back. And for me, sometimes that's hard for me to manage. All right. And I got my machine back, yay! And it's so wonderful to have it where it can hover over, and I can get that right where I want it. I love it. And I can, you know, take my stitches right up to the, almost to the edge where that pin is. And I'm going to do the same thing on the next two. I'm put them, and this one I don't have to flip. And that's, you know, that's just remembering those things. One time you flip, one time you don't. And you know what happened to me last week when I flipped and I was not paying attention. I, on camera, sewed it wrong. And I am taking time to make sure that that is absolutely aligned before I stick my pin in. And when I press it, you know that I break the seam open, and so I am not going to have that bulk there. It's not gonna be there. And for me, and for all of you, you find your ways that work for you. And I'm here to share with you, and you know, what I do and how you can approach this, and maybe some thinking on it. But really, you know, and when that comes out, because I have pinned right in that seam, I don't seam, and this has to go this way. See that flipping thing? And so now I can look at this and say, which way do I need to press this so that I have my seams going in a different direction, and I can, you know, I can sew these two together. So for this one, I'm going to press it so that, you know, the press seam goes to the left. And this one is going to go to the right. And again, you get that heat down. And the other thing that I want to mention to you, I don't know if you're having some of the same issues, but I notice that the white fabric, I get all this fraying. And some of you have even mentioned it on the in the chat box. On different occasions, that you starch your fabric prior to, and that works great. And when I, you know, get done with that, or I'm working on those edges, I use the Acorn Precision Piecing products for that too. So those things also work. So now I can butt these seams up. And I shared with you my, you know, across the seam pinning. Normally when I, you know, have blocks come together like this, and you know that I pin 1/8 of an inch on the right side, and I run it across to the left side so I can take one stitch into that seam line. And now I need to go back and make sure that these are lined up again. And I'm going to drop a pin in because it has a tendency to want to move as the machine is going through. The other thing that I would say to you is, if your machine is pushing, whenever you have, you know, 2 pieces of fabric or even 4, here I have, you know, 8 coming in, seam on top of seam, I had to raise, you know, my foot pedal just slightly, so that it doesn't do that, and it really, you know, helps significantly. So on my Bernina, I went from 50 to a 47, and it works great on that. So it doesn't push this at all. All right, let me get. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have my machine back. So as you can see, I'm going very slow because I have that pin there, and now I can pull that out because I took that stitch into and again, on that angle, I can take that stitch into the seam, so that seam is not going to move. When I was using that little machine the last few weeks, it really pushed my fabric a lot, and that was tough. You know, I had to kind of relearn how to use you know, that machine again. And then when this one came back, I had to relearn it. And do my settings, redo my settings, all of that kind of stuff. So now I have that centerpiece, and you know, all of these on the sides are coming together exactly where they need to be in the pinning process. And so again, I'm going to take this, because these seams will match up better if I split that. And for those who still, you know, ask questions, I hold, you know, the side of each one, not into the seam, but on the side of the seam, and I twist in opposite direction, and I get that little, and I'll just bring that down, and then I'm going to push that, you know, run that along that side seam on both of these. I just run the edge right along that seam so it's nice and flat, and then I can okay, and there you have that center block. And as you are putting these side pieces together, you're going to be bringing those 2 in right there. And before I do that, I want to check and make sure there's no questions that I need to answer. Hi, Stella. And okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this point, and please do, if you have any comments to make or any tricks or tips that you have that help you, because as you know, I said, we all learn differently. Please put them in the chat box if you can, or if you will. So now I'm going to butt these 2 up against each other, and again, I'm looking to make sure if these 2 seams are matched. I want the top or that point to match that point, and as it comes in, and fortunately for me, it actually matches. So I again, because it's matched, I've got it there. I'm going to run my pin from the right 1/8 to the left so that I can take a 1 stitch into that seam line, and now I can sew the right side of that. And sometimes when it gets to this point and I'm going, you know, I'll use my stiletto to help, you know, just guide that under, because I really don't want it to. And I'm not pushing it, I'm just guiding so that doesn't flip up on me as it goes. And making sure that these corners match up. And of course you can pin the corners, because I want them, you know, to perfectly align. You know, perfection is elusive, at least in my world. All right, then you come back, and as we get ready to press those, you'll see that those are all coming to the center. So let's get that, you know, make that cute little, I just think these little kind of pinwheel looking things in the center are so cute. And this is a good place to use that precision piecing stuff. Others of you will use starch, whatever, just so that they, you know, lay flat. Putting some heat to that, flipping it over. And sometimes the direction in which you iron changes. That I got this side. I'm probably going to go back because as I look at it, I need to take one more stitch out in the center right there. When I broke it, that last stitch didn't break, and that pulls that back. So when I repress it, that'll come back together in the center. Okay? Any questions on that block for today? Let me check the chat box. Is there a way you can show how you just showed how you twisted the middle where the seams are? Yes, I will show that again. I will do that with the next block. All right, so then we have June, a little bit more colorful. I have put together the two blocks. This one is a flying geese with the dark in the center. This is a flying geese with the light in the center. And as you can see, they fit in all the way, the four sides. Okay. Then this one, I call this a butterfly block because it sort of looks like a butterfly. And so this would be the top center. This would be the side. And I've already made a few of them. And so you would have one of these on each side. Something like that. All right, would make your top row. And then I'm making, you have your flying geese for the center with your large block in that. And then here comes the other butterfly block and flying geese for the bottom. Now again, this is a place where it's easy to flip in the wrong direction. So make sure that you have your block situated correctly for which row you're sewing it onto, because again, these blocks are so easy to flip around opposite of each other. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to sew. This is my bottom right, so I want to make sure that I've got it correct as it's coming in, because it'll sit like this. Okay, so let's put these two together, and I'll show you how I'll sew this one simply so I can show you that how I flip it. So I've butted these seams up together. they're coming in at the corners correctly, so I don't have to necessarily pin for the sake of easing anything. And I pin from top right to bottom so I can sew one stitch into that seam line right there. All right. Coming into the seam, one stitch into the seam line. This side is still on. All right, here we go. With that seam. All right. I put these two fingers on this side, not in the seam line, but next to it. These two fingers, my pointer and thumb on this side, and then in opposite directions. So this, my left hand is coming towards me, my right hand is going away from me, and I just break that first stitch or two that I've sewn. That way, when those, they just pop open. And on the last one, the last stitch didn't pop, and it's not on this one either. So don't cut the thread, but just open it up like that, because you don't want a hole in the center, and it won't give you one. And now that is going to lay nice and flat. And generally speaking, when I have those other seams, I tend to use and just make sure that that's loosened in the center of that. Does that help and make sense? I forgot already. Stella, I hope that answered it. If it didn't, let me know. And then I, press, that side seam on each side. Just run my iron down it. I'm not pushing or pulling on anything because I don't want to stretch my fabric. And what's nice about that, when I, use the seam ripper, I can get that point like right there. Okay, Stella, you're welcome on that. Now, we've done these, these type of seams, and this one. And I want to show you again because I need to go back. This here, these seams will all come together, but I have this now only two fabrics, and I have all this bulk on this side. So I'm going to go back, and I am going to repress that. And you may decide that you want to press those seams open. But the important thing right here is to make sure, again, that you get those seams, this point, and this is where you can, put a pin right there at the point of that, and you can come back, whoops, and you can come back and put this pin right there. And straighten that all out. And then once I have that, I hold it between my two fingers so that it stays straight and it's not going to move on me. And I will drop my pin in from the right and move it to the left. And that's still held straight, so that when I sew my seams, and this one I'm going to pin because I need to do a little bit of easing in there, but I may not need to do that when I, put my seams in that different direction, change the direction of the way I press my seams. But when I sew, this should be 1/4 inch from the edge of that. And if I took my little ruler, and sometimes I actually do measure this because this pin is right there, and I'm going to measure from the edge of that, and I've got 1/4 of an inch. And because I know that I put the pin there, it was held exactly. If my 1/4 inch hits right above where that pin is, and it will, because I am measuring my 1/4 inch seam here, and when I sew over here, I'm following this 1/4 inch on my Simply my Sew Steady mat. I'm using the side of my 1/4 inch seam because I know that on this particular foot on this machine, it is exactly 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to get that my goal of making those come out correctly. Okay, so that is the 2 blocks for today. Let me make sure there's no other questions, no other comments. And you guys, it is easy to turn these the wrong way. So, you just have to look and, refresh yourself on that each time. And so July and August is next week. And let me go back to the table. So July gives us a star in the center, and that just works really wonderful. And we're the only new format for the half square triangles is going to be these corner squares, where we bring it in here, but it's not really new because we've already kind of done that with a half square triangle. So this time it's a full square of color, because it was white before. So it's not really new or different, but because of the way the half square triangles are turned, and you can turn them so many ways to get so many different patterns, that we're going to get a star. And then in August, we have our square and a squares again. We have our butterfly. We have our, our flying geese. And it's kind of fun that there's the butterfly block in the center. And if you were to make a whole quilt out of this block, depending on the fabrics that you use, and if you're paying attention to value, you can get a wonderful like an Irish chain quilt going through the blocks and through the whole quilt. And so that's what's fun, to be able to look at these blocks and see if you have a block that you really love, what you can do with it if you put it all, put them together into one block that you enjoy making. So anyway, so July and August, nice happy fabrics with these 2, and I will see you next week. And sometimes I miss, and I appreciate you guys that come on and say the good tips and stuff. I feel like my job is to help you just perfect what you're doing, or get it to where you want to go. And if those little things that I say can help, that's what my goal is, because I know that you can, if you're here, you can quilt, and many of you are good at it. So thank you for all of your good thoughts and that, and I will see you next week.